And I would like to mention that there are different reasons why people don't report, why we don't have real numbers. And I think that is one thing is that, like you just mentioned, the shame. There's a lot of shame
Mm.
behind coming out and saying, this is what happened to me,
Mm.
because that connects us to our core beliefs of feeling unworthy, feeling
Mm.
filthy, being not lovable, not good enough. So
Mm.
people won't want to share because they feel that they are responsible, even though it's never a child's fault.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up.
Hi guys, welcome back to Neff Inspiration, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Today I've got Naomi Morad with me. Naomi is an amazing woman who has made it her mission to go out there and help people by truly looking at the root causes of their behaviors, of their often complex flow-on patterns relating to things that unfortunately have happened to us when we were younger, often at times when we don't remember at very early forming ages. And it's so difficult because we often don't even realize what has happened to us. Yet the flow-on effects are extreme. And today I've got the honor and privilege of talking to Naomi about it. Naomi, welcome to my show.
Thank you, Stefan. I'm so happy to be here.
Ah, uh, it is so important to realize and to reflect back. Yet, many people, when you actually ask them, "Oh, tell me about your childhood," they say, "What do you mean? Nothing. Boring. Nothing really happened." When in reality, maybe these childhoods were not so great. When we look at adverse childhood experiences, what are the figures that sort of come to your mind when we actually reflect on childhoods that maybe are less than positive?
Rephrase that question.
Hmm. Um, let's we cut that out, or we'll cut that out in a moment. I'm asking with regards to the incidence of sexual abuse of any kind of the four ACEs. I would have quoted 1 in 7 in Australia, and probably 1 in 6, 1 in 5, as of people who actually have undergone some very traumatic experiences in their childhood. That was the question I was aiming towards as a sort of starting point, setting the scene.
So,
So don't answer it yet. If you want to answer, if that is a good question, if you have an answer, just say yes, I have. Or is that something that at the moment nothing comes to your mind?
no, I have like a statistics, if that helps.
Absolutely. To actually
Okay.
give, that's right. And we both know them, but it's good to actually put them out there, to actually tell the viewer, hey, the reason that you're listening is you're not alone. I guess that's what it is.
Okay.
So, 5 seconds pause, and I'll restart the question, okay?
Okay.
In your experience, what is the incidence, the prevalence of childhood abuse, of childhoods that are not so nice, where there are a lot of adverse childhood experiences?
There is an extremely high number of people who feel shame. About 80% of people feel some kind of shame as a result of childhood trauma. Um, it's somewhere between 60 to 80. It's not like these numbers are not 100%. And regarding statistics of incest, which means sexual abuse within the family, the numbers are every 2.5 women and every seventh man.
Wow. And there are many statistics out there, and it is amazing. Obviously, many figures are underestimating the true prevalence, the true incidence of what has occurred. This is still a huge taboo. And it is so much more common than we like to believe. The figures are 1 in 7 in Australia, as far as wider childhood trauma, so physical and sexual abuse. And again, you could argue that this is underestimating the true sheer terror that is happening behind the white picket fence, behind the closed curtains. So to come up with real figures, it's very hard. I loved it that you were pointing first to the shame, because this is already the probably one of those things that children then lay down, the shame, the guilt, the wrong core beliefs that are laid down in response to trauma at an early age.
Yeah. And I would like to mention that there are different reasons why people don't report, why we don't have real numbers. And I think that is one thing is that, like you just mentioned, the shame. There's a lot of shame
Mm,
behind coming out and saying, this is what happened to me,
mm,
because that connects us to our core beliefs of feeling unworthy, feeling
mm,
filthy, being not lovable, not good enough. So
mm,
people won't want to share because they feel that they are responsible, even though it's never a child's fault.
mm,
That is one cause. And I think another cause is that when we go through severe trauma, oftentimes we don't remember. It means we dissociate from the trauma
mm,
because it's so unbearable and so difficult. And I
mm,
encounter that a lot in my work, that people come with a certain issue
mm,
and they don't understand why they feel the way they feel today.
mm,
And as they start processing, suddenly the memories start coming up. And then they remember things that they never remembered before,
mm.
that are connected to sexual abuse very often.
And that's very hard to swallow, but it is actually one of the survival mechanisms. It's the dissociation, it's the complete compartmentalization, pushing it somewhere into a deep dark corner of your childhood. And I do admit I have very few memories of my childhood. I have never had the feeling that there was any severe abuse. There was maybe emotional neglect and being a latchkey child, mum working and, being brought up by my great grandma. Maybe there was that neglect there, but I would have not said, hey, I had a traumatic childhood. Uh, Many people will feel exactly the same. So it's intriguing. And the question is, do we need to go down there? There's a reason that your brain tries to hide things from you, to protect your nowadays thinking. So why the hell would we dig up those old ghosts if we don't need to?
It's a really good question. And the only reason we would dig them up, and people don't even come to dig them up. People come because they have problems with, they feel depressed, they don't feel that they're lacking energy, or they have anxiety, they have panic attacks, they have difficulties in relationships. They don't seem to be able to hold a steady relationship. People have eating disorders, they have procrastination issues. I mean, the list is endless. And people don't understand why they have all of these symptoms. They don't understand why they are so unhappy in their lives. So they come and see me or another therapist. And
Mhm.
the way I work differently from other therapists and why often those memories come up is in regular talk therapy, you talk about the problem and you only use the neocortex, like your thinking part of the brain, which only has like very small amount of information available to you. And I work both with the body and the subcortex, which is our emotional brain, which stores all the memory, the trauma, our emotions, everything that's ever happened to us. And also where that is located in our body. And when we work with body, mind together, automatically we bypass the thinking mind, and our body takes us back to the core issues that are related to the issue, to the depression, the anxiety, the relationship issues, the lack of energy. It takes us back to the core of that. And when we get to the core, that's when we can make true change.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. And of course, I was playing devil's advocate here. And I saw the smirk on your face, but those people listening on the podcast here, because we both knew that this was an absolute bullshit question. So much of our nowadays life, and nowadays I mean within the people listening, we are probably in our middle age, and we have lived already many decades, and here we are showing behavioral patterns, showing responses being triggered, being stimulated in all the negative ways by something that probably has its root in our childhood and in something that has occurred to us between the age of 2 and 7 and around about that time. Ah, it has such a huge effect. And if we look, for example, at attachment patterns, at the way how we conduct ourselves subconsciously in a relationship with a loved one, 50% of us have maybe attachment patterns that are not so great, that are either coined by fear avoidance or abnormally strong attachments. And it's really, really hard. Yet, if we have never done any emotional work, then we are not aware of that. And you wonder, why the hell is there such a conflict in a marriage? And why does it come to a divorce? Ultimately, because none of these issues have ever been aired, ever been addressed. People have not given themselves the chance to explore that, however traumatic the exploration in its own right is. You could say that there is actually a lot of trauma involved when it comes to healing as well. So maybe is there a point that some people maybe sense that work needs to be done, but they also realize that it is far too painful to address that and much rather play ostrich, put a head in the sand?
I think a lot of people are very much afraid to touch their pain. And playing ostrich, putting your head in the sand. I think that's actually a very German expression when I think about it.
That could be. I do
Impossible
apologize.
dancing.
Someone in Canada thinks sand. What's that? An ostrich? What's that? So trying on purpose to not think about things. Because
Yes,
if you think about it, isn't that what we're doing with our escapism? Isn't that what we're doing
it's,
by actually scrolling 7 hours on social media or
yes,
drinking or eating in excess?
it's definitely an avoidance pattern. Also blaming the whole world, blaming your partner, blaming the circumstances for your
Yeah,
misery.
yeah.
It just, you just keep attracting the same situation over and over again without actually being able to make a change. And I think one thing that is really important for people to understand, and something that I always say, we take our pain with us wherever we go,
Mm,
even though we're afraid to face it,
mm.
but it basically runs our lives. That means you have breakfast with your pain, you go to work with your pain, you have lunch with your pain, and you meet up with your friends, and then you have sex with your partner, and you take it everywhere you go.
That's a lovely picture that you're painting there, actually. I always thought of it as luggage, as a backpack that you're constantly wearing with about, 30 kilograms of heavy stones that are very uncomfortable. I
Yeah.
never thought of it this way. Yeah. Have breakfast
So,
with your pain.
when people say, I'm afraid to face what's there,
Yeah.
it's it's there all the time in everything that you do, unless you choose to stop and learn to listen. And
Nothing. Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. If you look right now in January, as we're recording that, people will have had all their good years, all their good New Year's resolutions, and of them probably by now, 6th of January, at least half of them have already stopped, and give it another 3, 4 days, and it'll be a 90%. And it's the same with 95% of diets will fail. Spoiler alert. So it's the same reason. It's the same fact. We are not addressing the underlying reasons. There is in sort of the self-improvement scene, there are the 7 whys. If you ask any, or if you make any statement, this year I want to look good. Ask why 7 times. Why do you want to look good? Oh, I just want to lose weight. Why do you want to lose weight? Is talk therapy to a certain degree a a more elaborate version of the 7 whys? Is that a way of approaching it? And I'm intrigued because on the one hand, we've got psychotherapy, which is talk therapy, which you already said, hang on, there are limitations to it because we can only talk about those things that are clear in your mind. And however often you reflect on them, that's all quite nice, unless we ask questions that either break through the walls, or if we add in techniques that go to the subconscious level, we're probably not getting very far in a hurry. Is that fair to say?
Definitely fair to say. Yeah. Yeah. The problem is, as long as we only work from our logical mind, we can't really make any changes. Like, I know people who've been to therapy for 10 years, 15 years, and they still deal with the same kind of pain. They still talk about the same kind of problems. They may understand them much better, and they may have some better coping mechanisms, but they still deal with the same problem.
Yeah.
Whereas when you have other techniques that bypass the thinking mind and you can actually clear out the root cause of the pain, then what happened to us just becomes a story.
I like
But there
that.
will be no more pain attached to that.
Ooh,
It's our pain and our subconscious beliefs that were created around the trauma that we carry into our lives. It's those situations where we say, this always happens to me. I'm sure you know these situations. We all do, where we say, doesn't matter what I do, I always end up in the same situation. And it's frustrating. But the reason we keep attracting the same situation, even though we're sure that this time it's going to be completely different, is because of those subconscious beliefs that still run. It's like a program, like a computer program that runs in the background. And unless we learn how to clear out that program, it's just going to keep running.
beautifully said, isn't it? And again, all these things are happening in the subconscious. So we are not acutely aware of it. Therefore, we have not yet learned to maybe question certain behaviors, question certain thoughts, question certain patterns that run through our mind. And I always find that so intriguing. I mean, it's the fact is, once you've had an insight into what really happens on the subconscious, I can't unsee what I've seen, and this is scary. I mean, the statistics are brutal. We've got about 80,000 thoughts a day. That's a hell of a lot of thoughts. Now, they are all nebulous and they're all weird, but they are happening. And guess what? 80% of them are negative. And 80% of them are just often enough bullshit. They are just really mean voices in your head. But where do they come from? They come from these core beliefs that are laid down at a very early stage from those experiences. And suddenly, you are the failure. You are the fat woman, the fat man. You are not worthy. You are unlovable. You are whatever you are telling yourself. Now, that is bullshit. But unless we learn how to detect these voices, to stop for a moment and actually cross-examine them, and maybe utilize things like gratitude or utilize things like somatic trauma therapy, where we actually figure out, hey, hang on, there is, that is actually rubbish. That is actually silly. You were saying earlier that you intrigued me by saying where the trauma is stored in your body. What did you mean with that?
It means that everything that happens to us happens also in our bodies. So you and I were having a conversation right now.
Mhm.
And if you were gonna tune into your body right now as we're talking,
Mhm.
notice what do you become aware of as we're speaking right now?
The weight of my body sitting on my buttocks here, my elbows leaning on my thighs, a mild tension between my shoulder blades, mild
Mhm.
tension around my forehead. That's about it.
Okay. I can say for myself, I have like a little bit of like butterflies in my stomach and a little bit of I can feel my heart.
Okay.
Um, so there's something happening
Yeah.
as the two of us are interacting. That means
Mm.
something is happening in our bodies.
Mm.
Most of the time, we don't pay attention to these things.
True.
But as we grow up, same thing, also every trauma. In
Mm.
some cases, you have a car accident, it's very clear.
Mm.
You'll feel maybe the whiplash or the
Mm.
pain
Mm.
afterwards.
Mm.
But it's really in everything that we do, it gets registered in our bodies, in our cells,
Mm.
and also in our minds, in our brains, really. So we cannot separate the body and the mind.
Mm. Beautifully said. And we certainly see that again and again when people come to doctors, often repeatedly, because their pain is not going away. Their problems are not going away. And they're having yet another MRI scan that shows absolutely nothing. Or they have yet another, whatever examination, often very invasive examinations where doctors believe, okay, maybe we need to really look for a tumor or look for something. And things can become quickly very medicalized. And especially maybe in America, where there's more a litigious society, maybe compared with New Zealand, that maybe there will be more investigations done there just to cover the doctor's backside. Having said that, this medicalization is actually not so uncommon. I have certainly seen it a lot in my pain clinic, where, I mean, I've got this one case in my memory, a lady who's had for 30 years had chronic abdominal pains, has had multiple doctors and investigations. And as part of my intake, I made all my patients fill out questionnaires, extensive ones. And one of the questions was, have you ever been abused? And on the day of the first meeting with this lady, she came in with a support person, prim, proper lady in her mid-50s, probably early 60s. And she introduced herself, I introduced myself. And before we even sat down, she said, I want to thank you. And I said, oh, yeah, okay. Why do you say that? You're the first doctor of all my doctors who has asked me if I've been abused. And the moment she said that, it was, guess where we went. And she felt the first time able to relate that during decades of an abusive marriage, her partner, her husband, had routinely kicked her and punched her into the stomach to not leave any signs. And there she was with now decades of abdominal pain. And once we actually addressed that, it was clear that she didn't need painkillers, that she didn't need yet another MRI. She had, the doctor said again and again and again, ruled out other reasons for it. And she was incredibly grateful. I never saw her again. I sent her to a psychologist. And the sheer fact that you don't hear from people is sometimes a really, really good sign. I would have not been surprised had I then received a thank you letter later on. But the sheer fact that I didn't was probably a good sign that she moved on from a horrendous story.
And there are so few
Hmm.
doctors, people in the healthcare system that actually, I almost want to say, allow themselves to think that way today. It's
Hmm.
like there's something very, I don't know, I don't even want to get into that, but something very narrow-minded in the healthcare system, at least here in the States. I know, and I've lived in many different countries, and it's pretty much the same in most places. Very few times the doctor will actually really care today about the patient and really choose to ask the right questions. I remember when I got married when I was 21 and I left Germany where I was raised. And every time I came to visit, I would get sick. And after the third time that I came to visit my family, and I went to see our doctor, he asked me, I'll never forget that. He looked at me and he said, "Miss Morad, have you ever thought about why you get sick every time you come to visit?" And I was really stunned, taken back by that question. I was maybe 22, 23 at the time. And I went home and I asked myself, why am I getting sick every time I come here? And suddenly I realized I get sick because that was my way of protecting myself from what was happening at my parents' house. And that's what I did. My whole upbringing, I was sick every month because that was the only way to protect myself. That's the only time where I felt that my mother was nice to me. So every time I would come and visit, that was to make sure that I would not get punished for whatever reason, for whatever it was that I never did. But yes, so our subconscious plays a huge role in that. And after that, I never got sick again. It was amazing. It's true. True story.
And indeed, and when we look at the issue of obesity and the issue of women and men really struggling to lose their weight, when once you start digging, there's a surprising incidence of similar driving factors, because being obese was certain, being really fat was a certain guarantee that there was maybe less sexual abuse, that there was less abuse in its own right. Have you, in your work, experienced that as well?
To be honest, I have not worked with people on their weight, but not because it's something I wouldn't do, because to me, it really doesn't matter so much what it
Mm,
is that people come with. I will look at what is the root cause of that.
exactly.
It's just that
Mm,
nobody's come to me so far
mm,
for
mm.
issues.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I had some very informed people who were specializing in weight loss, who equally understood that the psychology of overeating is actually quite intriguing. And as long as you are not addressing some of the underlying factors, the drivers that make us go for high sugar foods, of ultra processed food, that you are bound to fail, that people will maybe make some breakthroughs and then very quickly go back to where they were, or typically more worse, that they get bigger. And that is exactly for those reasons. So it is important that we all recognize that we have got our own journeys. We all have got our own unique kind of set of traumas, however big or small we believe they are. But many of these experiences, even if you don't call them traumas in your own
Mhm.
mind, they have got flow-on effects. And I think that
Yeah,
is the important bit. And,
absolutely.
and some of us just have horrendous experiences, if you can remember them or not. And I loved it how you actually thought about it from the word go. What are the implications for my life right now? If you can say that you live your life to the fullest, that you're happy, that you're absolutely all right, then it's probably unlikely that you would listen to this podcast or that you watch us here on this show. So I doubt that it's all fluffy and pigs can fly. I'm not so sure. So there's probably a good reason that people are listening and watching us here right now. For those people who are still maybe a little bit in denial and or maybe have not yet recognized that their behaviors are really impacted quite dramatically by things that have occurred to them in the childhood, how would you what would you recommend those people that sense that work could and maybe should be done for them to really break through their shackles, break through the walls that are holding them back, the procrastination, the overeating in this case, the behaviors, the repeatedly ending up in the same situation because you have not done anything different. What would you tell such a person?
I think I would ask them what it is that they're afraid of.
Nice. Nice. Okay.
Because I would be curious what is holding them back. What are their worries? What are their concerns? What are their fears
Ooh.
of not moving forward? I mean, obviously they feel stuck, they're unhappy, but I think even it's hard for people sometimes to admit how stuck they feel or how unhappy they are. And it's sort of easier to continue the same kind of pattern and the same kind of behavior because it's something that we're familiar with. And as painful as that behavior may be, as much pain as it might bring us,
Oh.
it's also something we're so used to. It's something that we know how to cope with. We know how to cope with our pain. We know how to cope with the feeling stuck or the feeling down, or and people are afraid of change often. Change is scarier, even though it can open so many doors. But funnily, often people are more afraid of the change and the success that may be waiting behind that wall. And it's easier to stay in what we know, even though we're miserable.
What a beautiful answer. I love that. I love that. And because if we now put it into context, I have just gone through a divorce and I'm still reeling from the consequences, the grief, the loss, all those kind of things. And of course, I've had the pleasure of speaking to quite a few men and women about that. And everyone, first of all, the majority of them have gone through a similar experience. And all of them are saying, look, 2 years, 3 years down the line, you will look back and say, why did you not make this change earlier? And everyone is saying the same, without fail, actually, that they're now much happier people. And with that, I'm not suggesting everyone to have a divorce. I'm just saying that sometimes, if everything else has failed, you need to make strong decisions. And decision means to cut off from the French. If you actually look at the word decide, cut off your past, and every cut hurts. But then at least you can heal and you can grow and move forward. And I think that's the same when it comes to shame and guilt and feelings from our childhood, feelings from, and maybe sometimes it's the childhood, often it is childhood, but it might be other things that we have difficulties letting go. Someone said to me, if something still triggers you that was more than 18 months ago, you really need to work on that because it's not really helping you. And I thought, oh, that's actually putting a sensible time frame. Isn't it normal to deal with things, to ruminate on them, everything that happens to you? You might be actually very sensitive to it, and it's just the way your mind is wired. You just think about it again and again and again. Where do you draw the line? These 18 months, that was one opinion. Now, it was Johan Peterson actually who said that, but I actually thought that is quite a good timeline. Where do you draw the line, and when do you get worried in your own mind?
It's funny because I've never thought of it as a timeline.
Mhm.
Um, I think that people deal with whatever they deal with
Mhm.
when they're ready to deal with
Mhm.
it,
Mhm.
and not one moment before.
Mhm.
And even certain issues that we deal with, I'll take your example of your divorce. I don't know much about it. I don't know anything about your divorce, but I'm sure there's lots of things that happened in your relationship that caused you pain until you took that step to get a divorce.
Mhm.
And let's say you will have dealt with aspect 1, 2, and 3 that affected you. But aspect number 4, you might only look at in 3 years and 5 years and 10 years, or maybe never. And not because you want to or don't want to.
Yeah.
It's like our subconscious knows what to release and what not. Our subconscious knows exactly how much to reveal at each given point in time. And we never deal with things that we are not ready to deal with.
The teacher appears when the student is ready. Yeah.
It's
Okay.
simple. And even, I saw it in my own healing process, and I see it also with my clients. There are things that will come up again and again and again, and every time we heal another aspect of that wound, and every time we go back to that pain, we'll we'll we will go and we'll uncover another layer and another
Mm.
layer,
Mm.
another layer. And things are not always so straightforward. And it has often many different connections and dates back again and again and again to many different situations. And we cannot always
Mm.
grasp it all at once. We actually can almost never do that.
No, exactly.
Like in steps.
And this is a very meandering path that you're taking. It's a very convoluted path, and it's a beautiful scenery that you're walking through, very dramatic scenery sometimes, but it completely is a winding path. So you take one step and look around and think, okay, yeah, that's quite nice. And then you take two more steps, and suddenly there's a complete different scenery there that you had not seen before. And that's the same with your life. And it's the same with things that happen newly to you, or new challenges, where you thought you've done it all, and then suddenly there's a new obstacle, a new challenge, a new something you had never experienced. Or something triggers you to look back in time, and it might be an innocent little side sentence in a discussion, or the way you explain something to someone where you get this aha moment. And these aha moments, they are bizarre, wonderful, weird. And I I love them because they make me grow. I mean, that's just, you're my 530th interview, and virtually each and every guest has given me the privilege of growth, has asked me questions or stated something in a certain way where I thought, huh, had not thought about it that way. Or even when I had thought about it that way, just a little difference that it made for someone to say the same thing in just a little different way.
Yeah.
Suddenly,
And it opens up
exactly.
something completely in your brain.
And I think this is so beautiful. This is where communication and connection comes in. Because if you don't connect with people who are willing to be open, honest, authentic, vulnerable, and we don't have those discussions where we can actually grow, where we can be honest with each other. I've just written an article. I am fine, really, because here in New Zealand, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. You're rubbish. If we could just throw, can we just cut it out of our language? Just take it out. This I'm
Yeah.
fine. It makes me cringe. Nowadays, I'm struggling to say I'm fine. But then again, on the flip side, do you really, if someone wants to just say hello to you, do you really want to say, well, actually, I'm just going through a divorce. And by the way, yeah, I really feel today I've got a tinge of anxiety there. How are you? It's hard. We are not used to talk honestly about our feelings. Yeah, it's one of the hardest things you do, is it?
It's true, and it's not only that, we're not used to talking about our feelings, and most people are not used to I'm going to say something horrible, but most people don't really know how to listen also.
Ooh, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's
It's
a
like it's a threat to them to open up that world of feeling. It's like, just leave me away, leave me alone with that. I don't need that kind of stuff in my life. I'm good, just let me be okay.
So true. So true. Because,
Not part of our culture.
oh, please. Well, that's an excuse, the culture. I think it's their protective mechanisms that are kicking in because you have no clue what their childhood was like, what their trauma was like, what their kind of emotional suffering has been like. You can imagine that someone comes to a doctor and says, "Oh, really, I feel down and I feel so sad, and the world is such a bad place." And suddenly the doctor turns around and says, "You think you are bad off? Oh, let me tell you about my life."
Oh yeah. Listen,
So,
the pissing contest, like who's worse off.
exactly, exactly right. So, okay, we are used to hide our true emotions, our true feelings. We have all these masks that we put up in front of our face, and they are there to protect us. We have learned at a very early stage to show certain behaviors. Fight and flight is one of them, but people pleasing, appeasing, fawning, these are all survival mechanisms or certain patterns that we continue into our adulthood that just are protecting us, but they are also stopping us often from becoming the person that we deserve to be, that we could be if we
That we
just.
were
eh, You say were, and it's interesting.
that we
When
were
I look
born
back, I
on.
was
It's just
okay, born. Okay, cool. I take born. Um, because when I sort of think about my conscious history, I was quite an idiot. Okay, I was, because of the core beliefs, I had certain patterns that I'm not so proud of. Okay, so not necessarily shame, but yes, maybe shame is the right word, or a version of it where I say, wow, you could have really done better there and there and there. And whilst I've achieved a hell of a lot in my life, there are many moments which I'm not proud of. And I think they are overshadowing many of the achievements. So I've never learned to win. I've never learned to celebrate the wins, shall I say. But I've very much focused on those emotions, those things, and then the negative emotions, and then try to run away from it. I mean, is so many people do run away in, and we end up in often worse scenarios. Many of us drink to excess or use medications, things that help us forget, either recreational or prescribed medications. I mean, we had the OxyContin issue, the second opioid epidemic, basically in the early noughts. I mean, a lot of that could be treating the pain of being rather than the pain in the body. Is that something you see a lot in your work?
Sure, for sure.
Has it played a role in your life?
It has not played a role in my life. I've never been addicted to anything, interestingly enough.
Mm.
For me, it was rather the opposite.
Mm.
I was afraid to take anything because it would take away my control over my body.
Ah, how intriguing. Okay.
For
I'm
me, the loss of control was a lot more threatening.
okay. So you could say you have got control issues because obviously this is such a powerful issue. So are you still everywhere in control, even nowadays, subconsciously?
Um, I like to be present to what is more than anything else.
Okay.
And I don't like that feeling. I could just come straight out. There's only one way for me to really explain it. I was drugged a lot while growing up.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah. Okay.
So for me, that was unbearable.
Ah,
And I was not able to move, and I had no control over my body. And I was, as a result, like it was used against me. So I was abused for the first 20 years of my life.
I'm so sorry to
And
hear that. Yeah.
one thing that enabled that to happen was by drugging me. So I created the exact opposite reaction, that not wanting anything to
Mm.
take me away from having control over my body.
Mm. Part of me, the addicted part of me, says, I'm pleased. And that is so cringe, makes me cringe at the same moment, because how can I be pleased that you were drugged in your life? The reason I say I'm pleased, however bizarre that sounds, is if you look at the figures, I mean, people who have got 4 and more adverse childhood experiences on the ACE questionnaire are 7 times more likely to be addicted to alcohol. They have got 2.5 times the smoking chance, etc. So there's a very clear impact where people try to run away, and often that is shortening their health span and shortening their lifespan. It's those flow-on effects that we see, and that's where this the ACE study from Kaiser Permanente was such a breakthrough to actually allow us to measure, to see statistically the direct impact how adverse childhood experiences literally shorten your life, literally kill you with increased rates of obesity, diabetes, all kind of diseases. And it is those unresolved traumas that result in those unaddressed patterns that played such a huge role there. My goodness. My goodness. It is neither. It's horrible to hear your story. And it is so difficult to ask questions about that. There, there must be, if you were drugged, there must be part of you who maybe wants to know more about what has happened then, because it must be quite a nebulous, it must be quite a lot of things. Can you remember much then of your childhood?
I didn't remember anything until I was 28.
Yeah,
But I knew that something had gone awfully wrong in my life. I suffered
interesting.
from severe depression ever since I was 16.
Right.
Um, I had a lot of physical symptoms, a lot of back pains, and uh, lots of surgeries, and like on the physical level, my body was screaming. Um, Emotionally, like I said, I suffered from manic depression ever since I was 16. By the time I was 27, um, I had just given birth to my second daughter. I fell into severe depression, and this time there was no manic, there was no up or down, there was just down, getting
Mm,
worse and worse. After 8 months, I said, okay, I need help. And that was the first time that I was actually exposed to psychosomatic therapy. Until then, I went to a psychologist here and there. And that's when eventually, I first dealt with my depression, and eventually my childhood memories started to surface. And I remembered that I was sexually abused, basically started shortly after I was born until I was 20. It was basically until I left home.
mm,
And the memories came slowly. And to be honest, I'm 53 today. I still have memories sometimes. Um, and and it's not, like I said before, we're only ready to deal with whatever we're ready to deal with at each given point in time. And our subconscious knows exactly how much or little
mm,
information to release. So, you know, I
mm,
kept remembering throughout the years more and more and more and more. And
mm.
I have a lot of memories today.
Wow. Wow. That's so hard, isn't it? It is these memories. I mean, it's one thing to have memories. It's another thing to then be triggered by those memories and have an emotional or a physical response to them. It is the PTSD symptoms are the physical manifestation of memories flooding back, trauma that has occurred in the past. And luckily, nowadays we've got a far better understanding about PTSD and uh, complex PTSD, that we can learn how to uncouple, I guess, our physical reactions, that we can reduce the amount of new suffering that we experience right here, right now, from something that has occurred many decades ago. What were the steps that have helped you to come to this point? Because there must have been a point where you realized, wow, I've got all these symptoms. And slowly but surely, someone was pulling the curtain back, letting the light into that that house of horror that your childhood was. So there would have been initially, there would have been a lot of new trauma by you just remembering that.
It's funny that you call it House of Horrors, because that's how I always related to it. So, wow, it was the House of Horrors, my parents' house, definitely. Um, at first I was overwhelmed.
Mm,
And shortly after I started having my memories, I also started studying. I decided I wanted to become a therapist.
mm,
It took me many years to actually start practicing because I was so overwhelmed with my own trauma and healing from my own trauma.
Mm.
And throughout the years, I started studying in 2000, and we're in 2024. I don't think there's been 1 year where I didn't continue studying. And throughout the years, I learned amazing techniques how to process trauma more easily, how to clear that out of the mind, out of the body, out of our brain. So we're not stuck with this. At first, every memory, oh my God, it could take like a week to 10 days. I was like so overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
It was horrible. Like you say, it was like almost like being re-traumatized. And today, when memories come up, it's very different with the tools that I have today. I can process it differently. I can move through them much faster. It's not like reliving the whole trauma. So that is really, I feel like I had to remember in order to heal myself, but also my passion for the work that I do is really from a place that I know that doesn't matter what happened to you, you can transform your life. It's possible to heal. I literally went through the impossible. And the reason I'm sharing it here is because I really want people to know that it doesn't matter what happened to you, there's a way out. I was not just sexually abused by my father. I was trafficked for 20 years. I really went through hell and back. And I say where there's a will, there's a way. And the fear is often in the way of, what's awaiting us, and the fear of touching the pain. But like I said before, the pain goes with you wherever you go. But it's so freeing when you actually start to choose to heal the possibilities that are out there and the possibility to heal. And I don't say that it's easy. It's not, nothing is easy, but is it easy to walk around with your pain on a daily basis?
No.
No,
No.
right? It takes up so much space. It takes up so much of your energy. It takes up so much of your time.
Very true.
It takes away from our productivity. It takes away from our joy.
It's so beautiful to just hear the passion suddenly appearing in your voice, to hear this positivity sometimes breaking, not suddenly breaking through. We were talking about something very, very dark. And now naturally, subconsciously, there was this this spring flower breaking through the ice, coming out there out of you and saying, no, there is this positivity there, there is this growth there, look at me now. That's what was shouting out. It was so beautiful to see. And I think that is the difference between those people who were willing to address the trauma in their lives and those that are still stuck in their own individual houses of horrors, their own, they still got the blinkers on. They still got the blinkers on. They suffer, they've got the pain, but they're not even sure why they are suffering. And it's once we allow ourselves to be open and honest, then suddenly things are changing dramatically. And you are modeling that. You are showing that. And more importantly, you help others to develop techniques to actually address some of the physical signs and symptoms and the reasons, the obvious reasons why they are coming there to you in the first instance. But then also to explore how indeed that inner child has a lot to answer for. And when I say to answer, we have a lot of nurturing to do to that inner child. We have to show ourselves so much radical self-compassion, and we have never learned to do that. So therefore, there's so much work to be done. And I think this radical self-compassion is one of the best emotional intelligence works I have completed. Uh, Scary as hell because you have to address your demons. But it is so wonderful, and you are actually helping with so many ways. You're an amazing woman, Naomi. I mean, there's no two ways around that. Thank you so much for doing the work you do. Please tell me if there are people out there who want to know more about you and maybe work with you, get in touch with you. Where can they find you?
Easiest is to get in touch with me through my website,
Mm,
which is naomimorad.com. And you have all my information on there. And I work both in person and hybrid. I work with people all around the world
mm,
and would love to
yeah,
hear from anyone, even if they just have questions. I always
mm,
do a free intro call with
mm,
every person, and we
mm.
first get to know each other and see if we're a good match, and they can feel free to ask any questions they may have. And yes, yes, no, no. And even I just got to meet a new person. That is awesome.
Oh, you're amazing. Uh, it is so beautiful to see someone like you coming out, being so authentic, so positive, so full of life. I think that is the beautiful thing. Once we heal, we become these power sources of creativity, of positivity. And it is wonderful. And I think that is how we can truly make this world a better place. I strongly believe we can, but we need to make us the best versions of ourselves, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And once we take daily steps to achieve that, tiny little baby steps to start off with, but keep going in the same direction, then you will very soon be a very different being. And you clearly have done so much work on yourself. You have grown in such a beautiful way that your aura is now just radiating
Mm.
positivity. And for that, I'm grateful. So thank you very much for sharing these amazing insights, these very humbling and very deep thoughts today. This was an amazing interview. Thank you so much, Naomi.
Thank you for having me. Really.
Absolute pleasure. And you guys out there, I send you a huge hug. Look after yourself and live with passion, and more importantly, live with intention.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up.